Hi, everyone, and welcome to our March launch event. We are super excited for this launch because it truly represents a new Tonic experience for our users. We've had customers call it the new Tonic app when they log into the latest release. And that's in part thanks to our redesigned UI. That's one of the features of this launch, but it's also thanks to expanded functionality in several core areas of our platform, including subsetting and generator configurations. To shine the spotlight on all these new features, we're joined today by Kasey Alderete, our VP of Product, who will present and demo our latest releases, and Dylan Sweetwood, one of our customer success managers, who will provide stories around how our customers are getting value out of each area of the platform. And I'm Kiara Columbi. I lead our marketing function here at Tonic. And as always, I'm happy to be your host and help field your questions along the way. Please do feel free to chime in with your questions at any time. We love questions. You can post them in the Q&A or in the chat, and I'll make sure our speakers see them. All right, Kasey, let's jump right in.
Okay, great. So let me flip over to some slides, but we'll quickly get into the demo because I know that it's much better to show rather than tell you about all of this great stuff. So just to ground the things that Tonic cares about, there's two things that we really hold as dual purposes, and that's privacy and productivity. At heart, we're trying to help engineers build better because better inputs beget better outputs. And we do not think that this is at odds with doing the right thing. You can do well by doing good. So I get really excited when I see our customers out in the wild. This just happened today. And I know that they are taking the privacy of their customers' data seriously. So, we believe that by making it easier to do the right thing, you can more naturally embed Tonic in your workflows. So a lot of what we're talking about today is making it easier and more efficient to protect your data and ultimately to get to that output data set. So, one kind of spoiler alert here is that nobody wants to do subsetting configurations. That is not a goal that most people wake up, but they want that outcome. They want that fit for purpose data set. Likewise, nobody wants to apply generators. Like you didn't want a generator, you wanted the data protected. And so we're really going to be focused today on what is that end value and how we're making it easier to get there. And that's where Dylan's going to be able to jump in and provide some of that real world context as we go. So jumping right in, as Kiara mentioned, Tonic has a new look. And it's a little bit deeper than just simply rotating what was a left navigation bar to a horizontal bar. There's a couple of big drivers for why we've done this. The first is that you're going to see us taking more advantage of this horizontal real estate. So, you can think about it as a bigger canvas so that you can see all of your data. I actually was just talking to a customer last week and they referred to us as data artists and they wanted to know our vision. So call us the data artists. You can see us painting, all of the configuration and privacy settings across your screen. So you're going to start to see more and more of that come into play as our product evolves. The other thing is that we are establishing more and more global functions. You can see along the top here, there are a number of things that you can use across workspaces. And so we're better distinguishing that sort of local workspace navigation bar from those global administrative functions. And so kind of allows both of those capability sets to grow. There's also a few other things like a fun keystroke shortcut so that you can more quickly navigate between your workspaces. And I think just overall, it's just a nice look to indicate all of the innovation that's going on under the hood. So check that out. You'll know you're in the latest version once you see this new look to welcome you. The other big feature I'd like to start talking about is subsetting graph view. So quite simply, it's a visual representation of your tables and the relationships across them. So foreign keys, how they make one table related to another, all with the purpose of getting to that destination, that right output. We've been told that customers don't necessarily know a lot about their data. And I'm sure Dylan has a lot more he can share about this. So Dylan, what can you tell us about how customers are going to make use of this subset graph view?
Yeah, happy to chime in here. So, Kasey, it's like you said, right? Nobody wants to go in configuring subsetting for hours and hours and hours. And one of the things that I actually warn customers about when they're kind of first getting started with subsetting is that it's a really iterative process, right? That first subset may not be exactly what you're looking for with your output data, and it may take a couple of tries to really get the data that you need. What makes this even tougher is that a lot of our users are not DBAs, right? They don't necessarily know their databases inside and out as much as other members of their team might, which makes selecting all the right tables and all the right settings in subsetting, especially with our, classic view, really challenging for a lot of users and really iterative for a lot of users. The great thing about Graph View that I love and that my customers love is that you can actually see this visual representation of how your tables are related and what happens when you target a specific table or move some of those settings around, right? It's so much easier and more intuitive. And it's already helped a lot of my customers actually configure their first subsets or configure new subsets a lot faster than they would have been able to with the previous single view. I actually have one story I want to share here too that I thought was really cool. I have a customer that recently acquired a bunch of smaller companies, and they had been talking to me for a while about, we really want to get these databases on Tonic, de-identified, and be able to start kind of consolidating everything. But they don't know anything about these databases because they've never worked with them before. They were actually able to connect one of these subsidiary databases to Tonic and use GraphView to discover things about this database that they didn't even know before when they inherited it. So like how different tables were connected, that sort of thing. A very, very cool example. I'm sure this is going to be really useful for a lot of other customers as well, in similar situations. And if you're a visual person like myself, this is definitely like a really amazing way to get used to subsetting and to configure things a lot faster.
Thank you. Yes, I will show you a few things. And one thing I wanted to call out that I hadn't mentioned is that, subsetting may seem like a very simple kind of UI with just a few configurations, but it's actually a really complex, sophisticated algorithm. It's a patent pending technology that we have. And GraphView really makes that leap to make it that power accessible to kind of the layperson who's, as Dylan mentioned, not necessarily a DBA, but you get to play one with GraphView. So let me show you a couple of things. So in this example, customers is my target table. And then from targeting 5% of the customer's database, or the customer's table, I get all of these related tables. Okay, all of that makes sense. One thing I can see here with the GraphView is that there's this kind of orphaned part of the database. I've got these two legacy tables that are not part of the subset. That's why they're grayed out. And I might think to myself, oh, actually, I would like to include them. So let me, you know what? I'm going to add that as a target. That's how I'm going to include it. So if I turn this customer's legacy also 5%, so now I'm getting 5% of customers and 5% of legacy customers. Awesome. That's included. Now I'm going to try to do some more magic here. So this is combined with virtual foreign keys, which is a Tonic feature that lets you ad hoc establish relationships across tables that are not defined in the source database. So I'm actually going to pull in, because I don't want just a random 5% of customers from the legacy database and a random 5% from the customers. I want these to be the same 5%. I want to keep that referential integrity. So I'm going to try to create on the fly here a link between legacy and, let's see here, legacy customer key and customer key. Good. I've got this new relationship. Let's see how that changed my subsetting configuration. And now you can see that table is no longer orphaned. So we've kind of brought that cluster into the fold. So just a lot of iteration and opportunity here. It's really fun. I had so much fun playing with this, getting ready for the demo. So, we'd love to hear what kinds of things you're able to explore and come up with, and maybe even some off-label use cases, things like Dylan mentioned, things that you didn't expect to learn about your data that you learned.
It almost
I was just going
to say, it almost feels like you've got a puzzle and you get to decide what the outcome of the puzzle. You're creating the puzzle, moving the pieces around. It doesn't have to fit into the grid. That's really cool to see live. Thank you, Kasey.
Yep. And as Dylan mentioned, this green and orange is going to show you change over time. So as you iterate through that process, what's different from the last run and what did I change? So that's an important dimension of that view too, of that puzzle. For Workspace Inheritance, this feature has been out for a couple of months now, but we haven't gotten a chance to talk about it with you. So really just wanted to bring that to the forefront. This is best for our customers who are working at scale. Many times customers have multiple use cases for Tonic. So Workspace is the connection between a source and a destination. So anytime you want to reuse that same source, maybe you want to hydrate different database destinations. Maybe you have different sets of policies or different subset configurations. You'll now be able to de-identify once or define that connection once in a parent, and then create a child to inherit the properties of that workspace. So we'll talk a little bit more about what does that mean in practice, but you can think about parent and children sharing configuration. And let's talk about all the ways customers can use this. Dylan, can you highlight a few examples for us?
Yeah. So we were just talking a little bit about subsetting, right? Complex process. Most of the time, especially when it comes to our larger customers with more complex use cases, you're not just going to be configuring a single subset, right? It's not one and done. You're going to have multiple subsets for a lot of different users or different types of use cases at your company. And since a Tonic workspace can only have one subsetting configuration at a time, a lot of my customers have been using Workspace Inheritance to link multiple child workspaces, each with their own subsetting configuration, to a single parent workspace. This is really great for a lot of reasons, but the main one is that any changes to the schema or the generator configurations on the parent workspace in that setup are going to carry over automatically to the child workspaces. So you don't have to make those changes multiple times, even if different things are changing with the various individual subsets, right? It's a huge time saver, and it's a great way to keep everything organized within your Tonic instance as well, especially if you've got people with different access levels to different workspaces, that sort of thing. And I'll just point out too, this isn't just helpful if you're using subsetting. Anytime you have multiple workspaces that are connected to the same source database, but maybe with different settings or that are outputting to different destination databases, Workspace Inheritance is going to be a great way to prevent duplication of work in those scenarios.
Yeah, and one thing I love about this is it was really inspired by customers who are doing this themselves. They were keeping things in sync either manually or with scripts. And so we're just making this a native capability to reflect what people are already doing at scale. I will show a little bit of this. So I'm going to create a child workspace here live. So I've got this existing workspace with a bunch of generators already applied. So all of the blue squares here reflect generators that I've applied to de-identify these different columns. So if I create a child workspace here, all right, March launch child workspace. Now I have carried over all of those same columns because maybe I don't know the data, I don't know how it needs to be de-identified, but I know that I want to take not just maybe a 5% subset, but I actually want to take a much smaller subset. So I want to just do a 1%. And so and I have maybe a different destination database. This is for local development. This is not for our staging environment. So I want a much smaller one. But again, as the schema changes come through, I will now be able to inherit that from the parent. And likewise, at the parent level, I can go in and apply new generators. So I can apply a categorical, and that will cascade through to the child workspace as long as you don't override it. So you can make that decision to override the settings if you need to for some reason, but otherwise it's going to inherit that configuration. So now I can see kind of visually, I've got this one parent, I've got two children workspaces. I can sort of track what the generation history is of those and keep those all in sync. The next feature I am excited to talk about are generator presets. This allows you to change the default configuration options for generators. So generators are our building blocks of de-identifying data. There's many options once you kind of get down within the generator to customize and tailor those for things such as consistency, differential privacy, maybe some date ranges, lots of other settings you can apply. And again, this is really important for customers doing this at scale. So when you're doing this for across many tables, many columns, it's going to be hard for you to remember exactly what you did before, and obviously more clicks because you're going to have to reapply those settings. So I know Dylan is familiar with some of these customers that we partner with in designing this. So I'd love to hear, Dylan, how they're going to make use of generator presets.
Yes, very, very familiar. When I tell you, Kasey, I was so excited for this feature to come out, probably even more than all of the other ones. All of the new nav is, really great, really good looking. A lot of my customers have been asking for this. They've been kind of finding ways to get around it or trying to find ways to get around it. And it's already made such a huge difference in how they use Tonic, even just being out for the last couple of weeks. I'll just kind of start with one example here. And Kasey, you might remember this one. When we were developing the generator preset feature last year, we spoke to this customer who was basically having to apply an integer key generator on different ID columns in different tables. And every time they would do this, they would have to manually enable consistency with that little toggle. That doesn't sound probably like too much effort, maybe to some audience members. But when you're doing this hundreds of times and when you're doing it again and again with new tables that come into the schema, it adds up. And having to enable consistency every single time for the same generator just didn't make sense to them, right? It's a huge pain point. With generator presets, this customer now has a default state for the integer key generator that always has consistency toggled on, which means they no longer have to select it manually every time. It's just automatically enabled whenever they apply the integer key generator on those ID columns. So already saving them a lot of time. Imagine if they'd had this, a year ago, back when they were configuring their initial kind of take on Tonic. I think this is going to be a huge game changer for a lot of customers as they scale up, that initial setup of Tonic. One other thing I think is really cool, and we talked about this as well, generator presets are great if you have companies that are setting different quote unquote policies for different generators. So as you can imagine, right, it's not always one person on a team deciding how to obfuscate certain kinds of data and then, going through and making those changes in Tonic. For example, if you have a security team with really stringent practices or guidelines, if you're required to follow HIPAA guidelines for de-identifying certain kinds of data, those teams can use generator presets to limit within Tonic how those day-to-day users who are making those generator configurations can apply those generators, right? So it's going to make the whole end-to-end process not only more efficient, but more secure. There's not going to be ways that data can leak through or ways that settings can be messed up just because someone doesn't know which policy to use.
Yeah, and I like how you called out that kind of global visibility and controls level, because I'm going to demonstrate kind of on both of those. So I'll start with local and then, and how it makes it more efficient because you're not doing that hundreds of columns configuration, but I will also show what it means across your whole implementation. So at a very local level, let's take a generator like name. And let's say for most of my names, they're first, last, like all the fields are first, last. And I always want consistency on, let's say. And so I'm going to go ahead and save this as the baseline. So this is the new baseline. And so now if I go and apply a generator here, automatically first, last, automatically consistency, right? And so I can do that, set that new standard right here. Let's say I toggle off consistency and then I can't remember what was the original, and I want to actually make sure I shouldn't be deviating from the policy. I can very easily revert to baseline. So super easy right here. That's just like a very simple example. Another example I like to show is maybe like date ranges. So maybe for birth date, I want to do a random timestamp, but I want to do it, from these years. I can save this as the baseline because I don't want people over 103. That's amazing that you people up to 103 in your database. But let's say I don't want them to be unreasonable, like 200 years old. So I can have that as my default. And so then now if I, if I reapply it, it should be there. And so I've already got that date range set. And so if I set on any other future columns, I don't have to additionally go in and configure that. So that's the local level, pretty easy to understand, saves time. What I'm really excited about is the vision here with generator presets, and it is this global policy configuration. There's a lot more to come. This is really our first step. I know the team is really hard at work and really excited about future releases, but what you'll start to see is that you're going to get this global visibility across all of your workspaces for how your generators are being used. So I can set and customize these rules. An example would be in like categorical. Custom categorical was what I was going to show. I think it's going to, it's going to already be there. I put our names in this morning. So let's say I wanted to create a custom categorical that is just about, default is based on Tonic names. And so you can imagine customizing this to cities where your company does business, or email domains or company names that like just comes from a set list that you want to actually populate. And so now if I go into one of my workspaces, I'm going to use the shortcut key here. So if I use the shortcut key, the / I can just quickly go to my database. And if I now apply custom categorical, we'll do that. We'll do it here for this first name one, right? Custom categorical, it's already pre-populated with Dylan, Kiara, and Kasey. And so it just populates that. I didn't have to type on a local level. I can just reuse that configuration across all of my workspaces. So like I said, more to come. You can imagine a lot more flexibility as you can customize more of those generator presets. That's the main headline features that I wanted to cover today. As I have kind of alluded to here, we really partner closely with our customers in the development of features. And so I'm really excited.
Can I
just
jump
a second to get to the, go ahead.
Sorry, can I jump in with a quick question before we go to the other features? Question about Workspace Inheritance and generator presets. Could you explain how you can use those together and when you might choose one over the other?
That's a really good question. It kind of makes my mind explode, but we do have a lot of customers working at that scale. So I would say that Workspace Inheritance is when you want to think about across use cases, and generator presets is useful across columns. So generator presets is going to be valuable even if you're just working within the context of one database, one workspace, but maybe many tables. It can also help create standards across, but it's a little bit more valuable at just that local level, whereas Workspace Inheritance is, hey, I'm branching out in my usage of Tonic, and I want to start, not just reusing a column by column configuration, but a whole stamp out this schema and how I might copy that over.
And the Workspace Inheritance, if you have generator presets set up, if you're inheriting from a workspace that uses those presets, it's going to it can all work together. Yeah,
there's probably some sort of like math leverage. Like if I update a generator preset and use it in a workspace that is a parent of another workspace, you can think about all the columns and all the lands that will be changed. There's definitely an opportunity to work at some pretty impressive scale there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. So I do want to call out some of the other, I shouldn't have abbreviated this. This is data warehouse filtering for those of you who don't know, but our data warehouse sources are BigQuery, Redshift, Snowflake, our Databricks and Spark connectors. We have now made it possible to minimize data that is in those. So you can minimize while you're de-identifying. It's a feature called filtering. It's very similar to subsetting. We've also added support for a Vertica database through a new Vertica connector. We've made a number of enhancements to generators. We've upgraded our detection feature to detect international names. So we just have a wider library of names that we can detect in your sensitive data. And we are making it possible. We've long supported encrypted data, but we've now made it possible for users to define their algorithm instead of us having to customize that for you. We've made a number of enhancements to our API, more coming there. We've added other subset controls, such as being able to see what you've done in previous runs, adding more controls to filter what's upstream, what's contributing to that subset. And as I mentioned, the / keyboard, which I'm excited about. It's kind of fun for hopping around different workspaces. So this is a bunch of our recent stuff. I'm also really excited about what's coming soon. We partner very closely with our customers on our roadmap. Because this is public, I'm not going to share quite as much detail, but I'm really happy for any of our customers. Ask your customer success manager, and either I or someone from my team will be happy to share a little bit more of the detail around the features and the feedback that you've given us that we're working on. So if I can think about kind of the 3 sections of the roadmap, there is our core use case of creating that safe and realistic data. That is going to continue to get better, easier, faster, more automation. There's a lot of enhancements there. Some of the things that I wanted to call out are around detection, because the first step to protecting your data and making it available is actually finding and discovering the databases and the tables and all the data types, learning those patterns, customizing that to your business. We are also going to make enhancements in the protection arena. So I won't say too much because I won't say too much, but we do have a number of superpowers related to generators that we're planning. So it's not necessarily new generators, but more flexibility with how you can use them with each other. I'm sure a number of you have wish list items of how you'd like to see the generators do some cool things. You guys have really interesting business rules, and kind of keeps us guessing with how to combine generators in connection with each other, but also just making that easier at scale, kind of similar to the generator presets. Like, how do you de-identify hundreds of columns? We all get on a local level how to get that first table de-identified, but most of our customers are working with, terabytes of data, and they don't necessarily know all of them. So we want to move more to policies and rule-based protection. And then finally, kind of under the umbrella of trust and control, we have a number of global visibility features for dashboards, reporting, approval workflows, custom roles, kind of everything that you need to make it work in your team, in your organization. So we work with a lot of large companies that have very segregated roles for who needs to take what action on a workspace to get to that generated data. The middle tier, thinking about more data, more use cases. A lot of this is around our expansion for connectors, which we're always doing, but it's also about new use cases. And our new use cases come up very organically. We've been working really closely with a lot of our customers and their data science teams who have the same need for safe and realistic data, but they have a little bit different workflow, a little bit different way that they need to produce the data. And the output here, we actually have a separate product offering. It's called Gin, and it creates a model of your data. So it's a highly realistic model of your data that you can then use in your machine learning pipeline, in your synthetic data workflow. So it plugs in a little bit differently, but it's that same kind of core technology. We also have an upsert feature, which a number of our customers have requested and are excited about, which really allows you to use that fake realistic data alongside your legacy data. So we understand that enterprise environments particularly are very complex. Tonic does not operate in a vacuum, and you need to be able to adopt this realistic data alongside other test cases, other test scenarios that you don't want to lose. And finally, as I mentioned, we're always adding new connectors, and we've got a real focus on document-based connectors, NoSQL, semi-structured data, files. We are a leader here, kind of beyond just structured data and relational data. So we're going to continue to invest there. As I mentioned, or I have listed on the slide earlier, JSON protections. We want to make that even easier. We've got our MongoDB connector too today, and we want to make it easier to use throughout the product. And then finally, I won't go too much into it, but you can expect new problems that we will help you solve in this arena of DevOps value. I can say that we are really interested in going further along the CI/CD pipeline and understanding how that realistic data gets into the hands of those users, whether they're testing teams, development teams, offshore teams, support, sales demos. There's a number of different data consumers, and we want to make that more seamless for those teams, your DevOps teams that are supporting those end consumers of the fake data. So that is a peek at our roadmap and a look at all of our new features. So that's all that I had planned to cover today. But I'm really excited to hear if there's any questions.
Yes, there are a few questions that came through, and also that was so awesome to see all those roadmap. I mean, I know you said you weren't going to go into too much detail, but it really is a great teaser trailer of what's ahead. So thank you, Kasey. A couple of questions here, and please do chime in with more if you're just joining us. I see a couple of new people joining. Pop your questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll ask them right now. I've got a couple here that I'll start with. Let's see. Do customers always use subsetting in tandem with de-identification, or have we seen instances of customers using subsetting on its own for different use cases?
That's a good question. I know we have a few, and I'm thinking of one right now This is actually a really interesting use case. It's a revenue-driven use case. It's where the customer has data. It's not sensitive data. They actually sell it to their customers. It's like a library. And they want to segment portions of the database to give access to their customers based on what they're entitled to, what they've purchased. So they subset and they don't de-identify it because it's really just about making that custom purpose-built subset available to that customer and then kind of giving them API access. So they don't de-identify it because it's not sensitive data.
It's really interesting. And I think this question is timely because the graph view is going to open up new use cases for sure. It's just providing that visibility. Yeah. Another question that just came in, when using the generator for custom categorical, if you set one field with a custom categorical, can you set up custom categorical with different values for another field?
That is a peek into the roadmap. So yes, today you can only change the default settings by generator, but very soon, I won't commit to a date, but very soon you will be able to name your own presets. So I could create my custom categorical demo names, my custom categorical states, custom categorical companies, things like that. So you will be able, that is the vision and that is the goal. So in a release very soon, you'll be able to do that.
Awesome. Let's see, what else do I have here? How does, maybe you kind of touched on this, but how does data warehouse filtering differ from classic subsetting?
Yes, it's the same basic idea when you want to minimize your data set, maybe for performance or based on some other scoping criteria, like somebody's not allowed to see that much data. So it's that same basic idea, but in data warehouses, typically there isn't the same idea of relational integrity where there's lots of foreign keys. So most databases don't necessarily even have a function for foreign keys, or they're not defined in the data warehouse. And so filtering is a form of subsetting where all we do is shorten each table, irrespective of the relationships across the table. So, it's kind of on a per table filtering basis. It's sort of like subsetting by table without maintaining those relationships because it just doesn't make sense or it's not usually used.
And is that using percentages or where clauses or both?
I think it's both. That's a good question.
Okay.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think there's a table filter query. So I think there's a way that you write the table filter query. I'll follow up on that. But like I said, the reason you would do it is also because you're also de-identifying the data. And so it's just as I de-identify, I want to also shrink my database. A lot of these data warehouses have that functionality built in. You can, do a SQL query to limit the scope of a table. But it's just something that our customers wanted built in to do as they're de-identifying and kind of one platform, one tool to do both of those operations.
That makes a lot of sense because that was also a follow-up question I had is, is this something that has existed natively in the data warehouses? Another question for you, are the Tonic generators proprietary or based on open source generators? And then there's another question after that as well, but I'll let you answer that first.
They are in terms of, our code is closed source. We do make use of some public libraries, more on the detection side. I'm not sure on the protection side too much that we're using open source. So I would say the generators are probably more proprietary. And then did you ask the second question?
Yeah, the second question is the model created in GIN statistical or neural network?
I believe it is neural network. Maybe we can put a blog post in there.
Yes, I should be able to find that. Yeah,
I can't.
I was going to say, I know we use VAEs, variational autoencoders, which I think is a deep neural network modeling. Yeah. And I will have a blog post that can speak more eloquently than I can about.
Yeah. And it's the reason I say that. So it's not statistical in that a lot of what Tonic that I demoed today is more statistical generators that looks at exactly what's in your database and represents those statistics. The way GIN works is it does create a neural network model, and learns from your data. It may not be an exact statistical representation, but it's going to maintain much more complex correlations across columns. And so it is not just kind of a flat statistical masking approach.
Yeah, and I'm going to find that blog post and put that in the chat. In the meantime, I'll ask you another question. Are there any specific solutions for generating, connecting to COTS products such as Salesforce and SAP, et cetera? COTS.
Yeah, that's a good question. So one interesting thing is we actually have customers de-identifying Salesforce data today. So they have already put that data into a supported database. We do not connect directly to any of those because they're closed and proprietary and we don't have database access. It's something we're exploring for the roadmap. We'd love to help work with you. But I guess my first thing to say would be that that's not a blocker to us working with your data, because as long as it in the back end resides in a database of some sort, Oracle, Postgres, MySQL, SQL Server, any of those, or a data warehouse, we can process that data. We also have means, maybe even through services, to help put that data in a data lake that we can connect to. So we support data living in S3. We use our Spark connector to do distributed big data files. So there are a lot of ways to work around that, but we don't have anything direct today.
Awesome, thank you. Another question for you here. When setting up a child workspace and you set a different subset in the child than the main workspace, then when you generate from the parent, will each child with its subsetting be moved to the same database or different databases? I'll leave it in.
I know, I almost understood it. Let me try again. When you generate from the parent, will each child...
Is it
maybe I'm going to talk about two parts of this, and let's see if this answers it. So anytime in the child that you create a configuration, it overrides what's in the parent. So if I have a subset in the parent and I create a new subset in the child, the new subset in the child has nothing to do with the parent subset. At that point, it's just pointing to the source database and it's doing its own custom subset. So anything I've overwritten, it's not like there's a double layer here. That's the first aspect maybe of the question. The other aspect of the question is that generations and those destinations are completely independent. So I do not believe it is limited technically, but you would normally not point to a parent and a child at the same destination. You're going to have a separate destination for each parent, each child. And so then you can generate them independently, populating whether it's a child database or a parent database. You can kind of think about those as distinct. So hopefully that some combination of that answered your question, but feel free to chime in again if there's another nuance there that I'm missing.
These questions are awesome. Loving them all. Thank you. All right. And I shared one blog link. It's a little bit older, but we've got a lot more recent. I'll also just put the link to our blog where you can explore more of our articles around our data science offering, Gin. There's been a lot published recently. So some explorations of, results that we've found in training models and all that, deep dives into the data. All right, let's see what other questions we've got here. I know there's at least one more. Oh, this is a question I lined up just because I love hearing customer stories. What is your favorite reaction? Maybe this is the best question for Dylan. Your favorite reaction so far to these releases?
Favorite reaction so far? There's a lot of excitement, I think, for all of the different kind of features that we've released. I did have one customer. We've done a lot of like product announcements, but I've also been sharing individually with customers that I have one-on-ones with. And when it comes to generator presets, I had a customer that was very helpful in the development of that feature for us. And as soon as it was out, before I could even like finish telling him about it, he was like, "Oh my God, fantastic. Like, we've been waiting for this." So a lot of excitement. I'll echo what Kasey said a little bit earlier, which is that I know there's some current customers on this webinar, and I say it to my customers all the time. If there are features that you want to see in Tonic, if there are changes that you want made, if there's feedback, every single one of these features, all the ones you talked about, the new navigation, every single thing that's coming, all of that is directly tied to feedback that we've gotten from customers. And we work super closely in partnership with our customers, like all the way through the development process. And Kasey and the team are amazing partners in that regard. So yeah, I would say like whenever that happens, we have some customers that are part of that process and then kind of see it come out in the product as something new. That's always really exciting.
Yeah. Yep. Awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions. I'd say last call for questions. If anyone has one, we do have some more time left here. But if not, I will go ahead and wrap things up. I don't see questions coming through, but thank you. Oh, here, no, I do have one more question. Awesome. As long as I set a different subset in the child, then as long as I generate the child, it will keep the child subset?
Yes.
Love that. Easy answer. Yes, it's a good answer. Thank you for all those great questions. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Kasey and Dylan, for your expertise and insight. If you'd like to learn more about Tonic, or if you'd like to take Tonic for a spin yourself, you can sign up for a free trial on our website. I know there's lots of customers on the call, so probably not as relevant, but anyone who's new to us, you can also book a demo if you want to connect directly with our team and have a chat. Or you can reach out to us, hello@tonic.ai, with any follow-up questions that you may have. Thank you all again. This has been awesome. And we will see you next time. We'll have more webinars coming out soon. Just keep an eye on our webinars page. All right. Thanks, everybody.